Hello and welcome back to World of Warcraft and another challenge mode dungeon run. My name's Lumin and right now the final run in this series. This is Siege of Niuzao Temple. So we left this one till last because we were told by everyone that this was the most frustrating of the lot. The team that we went into this run with was again myself, a Protection Paladin, Zohee the Discipline Priest, Jemma the Frost Mage, Raenbow the Hunter, I don't know what spec he is, I honestly don't know. And then finally Vorash the Destruction Warlock, I think he was running Destruction this time around. Now, this one has a pretty hefty timer. You'll see when we start up, it's nearly 20 minutes. There are 4 bosses and you need a whopping 65 enemies. That's a crazy high number. You'll see, however, that it's not quite as bad as it sounds or looks at first. Now immediately when you start off here, you're going to want to try and gather these up and interrupt their Resin Weaving. Resin Weaving is what the weaker of the lot, the Amber Weavers, cast on you. And if they channel it on you successfully, so if they're not interrupted, then it stuns you for a good, I think, 4 to 5 seconds. In most cases, that's really bad. You know, your tank could potentially die, other players could die. It's just not a good thing. They also cast these resin shells, which you just need to kite them out of, because when they're in it, they take something silly like 90% reduced damage. That's obviously just not a good thing. This next part of the instance, there are multiple ways of doing it. We decided to go for 2 packs of resin flakes and then the boss, and you'll see why in just a second. When you kill the resin flakes, they put a debuff on you that increases the amount of damage you do by a silly amount, but you also take extra damage, and they explode when they die. So those explosions, more often than not, wipe your group if you have too many of the stacks on you already. Now I go alone, I pull the next pack, and then we just brace ourselves because this gets pretty crazy. Also, if you're a paladin, you can time your devotion aura just right here and negate a whole lot of the damage. So we've got power with barrier up. I'm going to be using my devotion aura as well to make sure we don't, well, die. You'll see in just a second. There you go. And then once devotion aura is up, everyone just nukes everything down. So in this specific run, we did incredibly well with that. But before, we wiped a whole lot on those packs. You'll see my damage numbers are really high now. This is also where we pop our time warp, at least our first time warp. And the boss just goes down real quick. Real quick. Once he's down, this is where most groups do their invisibility runs, but we decided it was completely unnecessary because we had more than enough time in the test runs that we did, and the resin flakes here, they do count towards the mob total of the instance, so, you know, why not just take them down? You kill them, you get extra damage from them, you kill the next packs, not too difficult. We basically just skipped 1 pack back behind us, which was between the 2 groups of resin flakes. I'm not sure if I'll get my camera in the right angle, but you could potentially see it back there. Then once you take the resin flakes down, you can really start moving beforehand because these packs aren't that challenging. At least if you have someone that can interrupt running along with you, then once you take them down, you have that increased damage, the groups go down faster, and later on, you can actually worry a little bit less about trying to get those 65 enemies. When we did the invisibility run here instead, then we struggled later on in the instance to tap some mobs that we needed to tap on one of the boss fights, but you'll see that when we get to it. I'll point it out there. Killing the resin flakes and then taking the packs after them on was actually just easy enough because of our high DPS this time around. I mentioned in our brewery run that Raenbow does a ridiculous amount of DPS, and I'll just say it again. He does a ridiculous amount of DPS. The damage output is there. It's real. But this next part is just more of the same. You know, you kill the flakes, you try get to these mobs before the flakes debuff runs out so you can kill them quicker. Interrupt the resin weaving when you can, try and move them out of the shells. It's the exact same thing every time. The Guardians do a little charge at one of your party members every now and then. It's not really that much damage. It should be easy enough for the healer to heal through that. You can see he just did it there to the left hand side. That said, I think if you do stack up here, if your whole party runs around together, you do get things done quicker because you don't have to run after those mobs. But if you are, like us, all ranged DPS, it doesn't really matter that much because the amount of damage the charge would do is the same anyway. But last group of resin flakes, and then we finally out of this silly hollowed out tree. And while you're killing this, you got to get one of your party members to open the door behind you by attacking it. Then once that DPS is out there, they can even start on the warden that's outside attacking the Pandaren. Once you kill that warden, then the big RP event starts up where the waves of mobs start coming at you and all that. But there's a lot of yak before you can actually even start killing things, so you want to get this guy down as quick as possible, and we use the Resin Flakes buff to do so. Now, there's a specific line that this guy says. I think it's, let's give the mantid a taste of their own medicine. Once he says that, then you can ring the gong behind you against the wall there, and one DPS should always be ringing that gong. You should just ring it whenever you can, whenever it's available, because you'll basically ring it, then it'll lock for a while, and then you can ring it again, and then he'll just keep sending the waves at you. He'll do it a little quicker if you do ring the gong, and that's kind of essential. You gotta do that here to save time. Even if you think it might be a little bit more difficult, it's worth it. It could potentially save you a whole lot of time, but now when these waves start coming up here, there'll be swarmers, demolishers, warriors, and then the boss. You want to try and get a big stack of tar here. So a big stack of the sap on the ground, and you want to keep dropping it the whole time. So your ranged DPS need to be doing that as much as they possibly can, but it gets a little iffy if it also hits the tank, because the stack in debuff can go on the tank, and when it does, then you take a whole lot more damage. And I mean a whole lot more damage. But if your DPS can do it properly, if you can mark a spot on the ground and try and at least stick to that mark, then things should go okay. We had a couple of runs where things went really badly here just because I got too many stacks and then I got one-shotted. Now, there's also a little trick where you can apparently kill the demolishers before they even get halfway up the stairs by shooting through a little gap in the fence here. We didn't do that. We just popped down some AoE and kept throwing the sap, and it took them down before they got to me. I also threw my Avenger Shield every now and then. I could potentially, if I wanted to, put a Consecration down, because all they really need is one tap. So one little bit of damage, and that'll kill them. That's it. Done. While this is busy happening down here, there is also the Amber Wing up at the top that will, every now and then, I think it's every minute or so, just come in and bother your DPS at the top. Really not a big thing. And your main focus should still the whole time just be on the mobs coming in down here, because you don't want them stacking up too much. Again, if you get the debuff on the tank, then you'll just die in literally a second or two if all of them are attacking you. So I use all my cooldowns and stuff here as well whenever I can. Like I stunned all of them with Blinding Light there. I try and keep some AoE damage up, and they do go down quick enough. You want to again just try and get the wave that you're busy with done before the next wave comes, because the last wave, the final wave where he sends everything, it's a whole lot of demolishers and another warrior or two, and the warriors, they do take quite a lot of damage to go down, especially if you don't get enough stacks of the sap on them, and again, it's quite difficult to do that. To do it at least without hitting the tank too much. You'll see I start getting a couple of stacks on me now, and then I just try be a little more careful. And if your healer is up at the top, you also don't want to stand too close to the wall on the right hand side here, because then you won't have the line of sight. So I did that a couple of times, and it cost us a couple of runs as well. Now, with the final warrior going down, here comes the boss. If you can get a lot of stacks on him of the tar, of the sap, then he'll go down so quickly, but you want to try and kite him up to the top before he starts doing his dash in strike and his 1,000 blades. He dashes to someone, then he does the blade spin there, then he runs back to his original target, and if he does it from all the way down at the bottom, then it's just a much longer distance, and you can't really DPS in the time that he's charging up there, so you want to try and not do that. Then you want to also pick a spot. We picked right here by the ramp where you're going to tank the boss, where everyone can just drop the tar on him without him moving around too much, without the tank maybe getting in the way. Here now is a good example of what shouldn't happen. One of the DPS fell down, and the boss then charged on them, coincidentally on that one DPS that was all the way at the bottom, and that just loses you a bit of DPS time. You can't drop sap on him in that time. And on that note, when he doesn't have the sap debuff on him, then he gets a stack in buff on himself that increases his attack speed, which will be quite deadly for the tank. You can see he's actually doing a lot of damage to me right now, and that's because he didn't have the sap on him. It's actually even worth it dropping the sap on both him and the tank to get rid of that buff that he gets. You want to do that. If it stacks up too high, you saw how quickly my health went down. It's difficult to heal through, it's difficult to tank. It's just not what you want. Once you take him down, you just gotta hoof it down to the gate. I'm not sure hoofing it is the right term to use, because you can actually casually stroll down there, seeing that there's a whole lot of RP that happens here again. You gotta wait for them to blow the gate open. Now, there is a little trick that you can do where I think the 2 or 3 seater mounts can be parked against the gate. Then you can jump into the mount and jump out on the other side. But that means that you'll only get at most 4 of your party members through, which should be enough because you could potentially send 4 of them through. They could start on the next boss, which is the next encounter, and then that final one can just come through once the gate's blown. It won't save you that much time. Again, that's not how you should be completing these challenge modes. If you need to rely on something like that to get through, then you are lacking somewhere else. Sure, if you're going for like realm best times or something, that's definitely something you're going to want to do, but if it's just a normal run to get the gold, you shouldn't worry about stuff like that. So he blows this up. Don't stand too close, else he'll knock you back. And once you get through there, you just try find the quickest route to get to the next boss. Generally, you should try and run past the first pack of mobs here. You'll see we don't do it in the best possible way, and it's again something I learned after. So in the next gold run that I did, I realized that you can run in front of this pack instead of running behind it, and that just gets you there quicker, like a whole lot quicker. But you're going to run through here, and then you're going to make your way around without aggroing anything, obviously, to the next boss. And he goes by the name of General Pavelack. He's a pretty simple one, and if your group is all together, you can just run straight in and immediately just start the encounter up, because he doesn't do too much damage, and the only 2 abilities he has that he uses when he's not in his little shield thing, which happens when he's on 65% and 35% if I'm not mistaken, are Blade Rush and Tempest. Blade Rush, he will select a spot on the ground, he'll throw his blade there, then he'll charge to it and do damage over there. Tempest, which you'll see in just a second, is a lot more difficult to deal with. You can use cooldowns and stuff to reduce the damage from it. If I'm not mistaken, Devotion Aura actually works on Tempest, but I keep missing it. The cast time on Tempest is just too quick and I'm just too slow, but it is something that most healers can heal through, and what happens is you generally only get at most 1 Tempest in before he runs over there and he casts his Bulwark and shields up. Then what happens when he does that, this is the kind of iffy part. If you don't get enough mobs earlier on, you need to tap these mobs. So the extra mobs that don't come running from across the map, the ones that are actually proper, that actually do a whole lot of damage to you, you gotta tap them, you gotta deal some damage to them before you start throwing the bombs on them, and that's what your DPS in this phase should definitely be focusing on. If they don't have stuns like Shadow Fury or, like you can see on the ground here, the Ring of Frost, then they should just be picking the bombs up that drop from the sky up, and they should be throwing them on the Bulwark over there, and they should be throwing them on the mobs that come running at you, and the mobs that patrol around the area here, to just take them down really, really quickly. The longer you take with the bombs, the longer the shield stays up, the longer the boss fight takes on the whole. As a tank, the only thing you need to know about the little swarmers that come running across the map are that they put a stack in debuff on you that makes you take more damage, but they generally don't stay up long enough for you to really take any significant damage. Once that first phase under the shield ends, he comes back at you, he does the exact same thing again. When you get him down to 35% life, then you will just do the exact same thing where you'll have to get him out of the shield by throwing bombs on him. But when you've cleared the patrols and the stationary packs that were here before the soldiers came running in, then you actually have a much easier time at doing this. It was only really, for me at least, very difficult doing that first pull and actually tapping all the mobs myself and then surviving. You know, that's a lot of damage that you gotta soak up. But once again, as you can see in the Bulwark, the soldiers keep coming, the bombs keep dropping. In hindsight, I could have, as the tank even, helped out a whole lot more with the bombs, because I had a lot of downtime here that I could have used more effectively. I mostly just wanted to make sure the DPS didn't get aggro, because I thought that they were capable enough to be able to handle this, so I just left it for them to do. You can see I tried to a couple of times throw the bombs, and I hit a few, but I'm not great at it. I'm really not. Once that second shield is done, you are in the clear. That's the last real transition on this boss fight, and he goes down really quickly after that anyway. He doesn't have a whole lot of health or a whole lot of defenses, and he shouldn't even get another Tempest in at all. You can see there that should be his last Blade Rush, and he should die either right after or during it. There you go. Once he goes down, you just rush to the bridge as quick as you possibly can. You can actually mount here, which I didn't do, but we were waiting for the healer anyway. Now, this part, I didn't like this part. As a tank, you need to try and kite these guys, and it's very difficult because you need to be within melee range of them when they're not hurling a brick. for them to kind of latch onto you. Then they'll only follow you for a couple of steps. I'm talking about the builders now. They'll only follow you for a couple of steps before they'll start hurling bricks again. So kiting them is really, really difficult. And thus, AoE damage is difficult to apply. You know, you can't really AoE that much here. You're going to want to, because you want to kill them as quick as you can, but it's difficult because you can't gather too many of them up, and the brick hurls do a lot of damage too. Then added to that, the engineers, they cast Crystallize, which, much like the mobs in the first couple of packs of the instance, it freezes you up. You don't want that to go off. You really, really don't. I would suggest not pulling more than 2 engineers and like 3 or 4 of the builders at a time. I think that does depend on the ability of your DPS and your tank, and obviously your healer too, basically your whole group. But if you can gather them up nicely, then by all means pull more of them. Just be careful for the engineers because you're going to want to disable them and interrupt them all times. At this point you'll see we've already got our mob count, so we could potentially have skipped a couple earlier on. And if I'm not mistaken, you want at least 2 minutes on the clock to deal with the final boss. I think we were cutting it a little bit close here, and because of that I pulled the next pack of builders together at the same time, and then I was just furiously trying to gather them up so our AoE would actually be effective. It is again kind of difficult. You just gotta basically backpedal the whole time and try and get them in a nice tight formation for your DPS to be able to get them down really quickly. But as you can see on the clock, around 2 minutes before we take the boss on, and because of the length of this challenge mode dungeon, we do have our time warp ready again. So we'll pop that the second we start on the boss. And this boss, as you no doubt know, is very annoying. Wing Leader Neronok, he hurls bricks. That's his main ability, I guess. He puts quick dry resin on players of the party, and to counteract its effects, you just gotta jump up and down the whole time. He puts caustic pitch down on the floor, which you just gotta move out of. Simple enough there. And when he gets to a certain point, I'm not sure if it's timed or if it's a specific amount of life, then he lifts off and he flies to the other side of the bridge, and one of your DPS needs to try and get there really quickly and interrupt him before he pushes everyone back. He shouldn't even be on this side for very long before he'll fly back. And then when he gets to that side, you want to aim to kill him. I don't even know if there is another phase like that afterwards, or if he only flies over to this side once and then back and then he's done, because we didn't really have the fight take that long ever. But the second he flies back, you're going to do the same thing. We had Jemma, our mage, at the ready to blink back to get there as quick as she possibly could to the other side and counterspell the Gustin Winds. I think that's what the ability is called, and then just obviously stop it so we can all get there and do the damage we need to do. And as I've said in a couple of my previous videos, ranged DPS are truly king in challenge modes. You're gonna have a much tougher time if you have mostly melee DPS, like, I don't know, enhancement shamans, DPS warriors. Rogues are an exception, I think, because they've got a lot of utility, same for monks, but certain classes just don't work quite as well. And as you can see here, the boss itself, I just used cooldowns, lots and lots of cooldowns here, because we wanted to make sure, but the boss itself goes down pretty easy after those 2 phases are done. And there's our gold. Gold medal on Siege, and that was actually where we got our Challenge Conqueror gold. That's the 9 out of 9 done. You can see I got my golden chest of the Holy Warrior in my inventory. That's the Transmog set. Then you'll get a mail with your Ashen Phoenix egg in that you can go and trade in. Kinda cool. Definitely, in my honest opinion, one of the most difficult things I've ever done in World of Warcraft, and also one of the most rewarding. It's just a great feeling getting them done, knowing that you can do something as difficult as that. Much more difficult than, say, something like Siege of Orgrimmar was for me to learn and master or whatever. I'm sure Heroic Mode Siege of Orgrimmar is a different story, but you know what I'm saying. That's that for our 9 out of 9 challenge modes. Hope you guys enjoyed the video guides, and we're definitely going to be doing the same thing for Warlords of Draenor, so you can check back here for that. Give it a like, share it, and do all that other stuff. Most importantly, though, happy gold run on Siege of Niuzao Temple. Happy that.